What do Falcons do? Rise up. Welcome to Rise Up Reactions, the show where we talk all things Falcons, NFL, Georgia sports, and in general the sports news of the day. I'm your host, Dr. Lee Denning, board certified in family medicine, and today is not actually going to be a sports video. I wanted to take a moment to reach out to my healthcare friends, my friends in education, basically anybody who has noticed when certain phenomena like full moons happen and the craziness that goes with that. So I am coming off of being on call for the weekend, and again, I work for a fairly small hospital. I love my job. I love the people that I work with, love this community that I'm working in. But there are certain things that I've noticed, and this would be over the course of residency, over the course of my time when I was in Mobile, Alabama practicing. There are certain things that you just don't do, superstitions, if you will, that, really probably have no truth, no scientific backing whatsoever, but they're, kind of things that we still don't do in the medical world. It's kind of like being at the craps table. You do not say 7. If you say 7 at a craps table, guess what? 7's coming out. Doesn't matter if somebody's been on an 85 to 100 roll run. You say 7, next roll is going to be a 7. It's just one of those superstitions. Same thing if the dice go off the table. Everybody takes off their bets because the next thing out is going to be 7. So you just don't do certain things, or there are certain actions that prompt you to do a certain thing in medicine. A couple of those things. So this was a full moon this past weekend, and it just absolutely seemed like it was crazy for admissions for both of the ER providers that I was working with who were telling me about what was coming in. And it just, if you talk to the nursing staff, if you talk to the medical staff, you hear the same thing every time. Whenever things get really crazy, nobody really keeps up with the lunar cycle, but the first thing people ask is it a full moon? And it just seems like every single time that it actually is. Now, there's been actual research done that shows there's no proven correlation. There's a guy named Dr. Bledsoe who back in 2018 did some research on this, looked back and did correlations on admissions and lunar cycles, psychiatric admissions, suicides, strokes, all of that type of stuff. Didn't find any correlation. But again, it just really feels like that is something that actually happens. Going along with that, another thing that I would say is a superstition, but seems to have some truth in reality here. There's certain words that you do not say when you are working the medical floor or you are in the office. You do not say certain things. And one of those big phrases in anything related to it is it's quiet. The Q word has long been considered the absolute worst thing you can say when you are on a shift, because it just seems like, again, there's no medical data behind this. There's no actual statistical data to back this up whatsoever. It is all anecdote, but anecdotally, whenever you say quiet, and I have been the victim of this when I was a resident, when you say quiet, it no longer is going to be quiet. You're going to end up, if you're a resident on the ICU floor, you're going to have like 5 DKA patients come in, somebody who's in respiratory failure. You're going to have, somebody stroking out in the ER. You're just going to have all sorts of crazy things happen when you end up getting somebody say the word quiet or any of its synonyms while they're working. So that's just a big no-no, especially any of you guys going fresh into medicine. If you're having a nice, pleasant day where it's kind of slow, which again is another bad word, you do not say slow, you do not say quiet, you do not say any of those things, because it will inevitably either A, get you shunned by the staff, or B, will cause the night or the day or whatever shift you're on to turn into a complete and total crap show. So just don't do that one. But again, no statistical backing whatsoever to it, but just seems to be something that does happen. Another thing that I've noticed is, things do tend to happen in threes. What do I mean by that? When I get admissions, usually I'll see like a COPD exacerbation, and then the next day I'll get another one or another 2, and there won't be any for a while. Same thing with almost any other diagnosis. In particular, lately, I would say cancer has unfortunately been that thing where me and other providers we've talked to, it just seems like we're diagnosing that a lot lately. And I think the rule of threes is that, that goes back a long time. That's an old superstition that extends beyond medicine. Bad things happen in threes. I would say family losses tend to happen in threes. It just definitely has seen that way for, my own personal experience with my wife's family, with my own family. Things definitely happen that way, or at least it seems to. And a lot of times I think we put this in our minds that they're happening that way, but it's not actually statistically relevant how we're doing it. And really, I think that's how a lot of people end up falling into these traps of superstitions. But there's a couple more that I wanted to talk about real quick. And this one, again, no statistical backing, but in medicine, when certain people are working, we have the cloud system in medicine. You can either be a black cloud or you can be a white cloud. It has nothing to do with race, nothing to do with any of that. Just, black cloud, we think thunderstorms, thunderclouds. There are people who come in and they are black clouds when they are working, which just means, again, you expect a crazy shift. You expect things to go off the rails, and you're pleasantly surprised when they don't. And then you have people that would be, white clouds. Just, your nice fluffy white clouds aren't going to be rain, no thunderstorms, who most of the time seem to have good shifts when they're working and don't seem to have any major issues with admissions or with just crazy situations popping up, or patients needing to be transferred, or emergent cases coming in the door. You just have these certain people who seem to be, good white clouds overall. And again, is that true? Are there black clouds and white clouds? No! These people have absolutely no standing whatsoever, or no ability to change how the day is going to go for the rest of the staff, but it's one of those things that we just seem to have superstition about. The last thing that I wanted to mention superstition on, and this one again, there's no statistical data, but I would say has been incredibly true throughout the course of my career. And that is, we do have what we call frequent flyers. Again, most of your corporate medical people, most of the legal medical people, they are going to want you to stay away from using that word. But in the medical world, we still use it behind closed doors. There are people who are frequent flyers that we see quite often in the emergency room or in the hospital setting. In residency, this is particularly true because, unfortunately, a lot of people in residency, you're working with a lot of the poorest population and a lot of people who either have what I called low or no insurance. So a lot of times they don't have the money to get their chronic medications, or they're not able to afford the absolute best drugs. And my information on that would be with your some of your diabetics who end up in diabetic ketoacidosis on the regular in residency or on the floor. And they're some of the ones who they can get insulin, the insulin that's been capped out, but they really need to be on things like Lantus, Tresiba, some of these longer-acting insulins that really, are not covered under that, capped insulin program, and, again, are different than typical insulins, or, they may not be able to afford their GLP-1 medications, your Trulicities, your Mounjaros, Bydureons, all of that type of stuff. They may not be able to afford it because when you don't have insurance, some programs, some hospitals have an indigent program, but even that's not going to cover the full cost. Some of these medications are $600 or $700 per month without insurance, and that's just not affordable for a lot of these patients, so they end up coming back. But again, when you say their names, that's a little just aside, but when you say that person's name and they're not currently in the hospital, or you're thinking about that person and you just mention it to your colleagues, I have much more often than not, within a week, seen that person back. Now, again, no statistical data, and we just talked about the reason why that may be. They can't afford their medication. They're not compliant with their medication. They don't do what they're supposed to do outpatient, or can't afford to do what they're supposed to do outpatient. So as a result, their health just continually gets better while they're inpatient, declines outpatient. They come back, they get better, they decline, get better, decline, and it's this never-ending cycle of them coming back to the hospital. So they were going to be coming back anyway, and that's where I'm getting at. You say their name and they appear. They were going to appear anyway within a few days. If you just give them enough time, they're going to come back because they just can't afford to get out of the situation they're in, or they're not making the choices to get out of that situation. But guys, that's just kind of some thoughts that I have. Those are a few things. So again, full moons, that happens in threes, black clouds, white clouds, the Q words, slow, all that stuff, say their name and pop up. Those are things that are typically superstitions and myths in medicine in terms of what you can expect on the floor. I know that type of stuff happens in education, happens in almost any service industry where there are regulars to that industry, but that's just something I wanted to kind of take a break from sports for a minute and talk about from a medical standpoint. Certainly has no backing whatsoever in science, but it's fun to talk about, and it is something that just seems to be, hitting us every single time we get to one of these events. So, again, full moon this past week. Crazy week for emissions, crazy weekend for emissions. But guys, let me know what you think down in the comments below. Have you experienced this before? Tell me your Q word, S word story. Tell me your black cloud story. Tell me any of that stuff down in the comments below. Would love to hear it. Thanks for watching, and as always, rise up.